Hi everyone, it's Tamara here with another card making tutorial. This time I'm going to be making my final Christmas card for this season, so let's get started. So the products I'll be using today, we're going to start off with the Happy Holidays Circle Frame Stamp from Pinkfresh Studios. So I'm going to be using the outside frame plus the larger sentiment plus the sub sentiment. I'll be using the Christmas characters from MFT and the diagonal stitch rectangles from Pinkfresh Studio. We'll grab out our Misti stamping tool and our piece of Copic Express at Cardstock. It's just cut a little bit bigger than what I'll need to cut out with my diagonal frame. And we'll grab out our stamp from the packaging, just being careful to not stretch that out as you remove that from the actual plastic cover that it sits on. We'll line that up on our piece of Copic Express it and make sure that's nice and centered before attaching that to our Misti door. Now, because I haven't used this stamp before, I'm just going to rub my hands over it to kind of prep it before stamping. I just find this helps get rid of any little bits that might have been stuck on there from manufacturing. And then we'll use our Memento Tuxedo black ink, which is perfect for Copic colouring. And we'll get our first layer down. Now, to make sure I stamped it in the right place again, I've just kind of made sure that piece of Copic Express it is just tucked into that corner. Stamp that up for a second time and give that a good press down. And I'm pretty happy with that stamping. Now, while we're using our Memento Tuxedo black ink, I'm not going to worry about the sentiment because I'm going to actually stamp that out in some Versafine Onyx black ink, but I want to line up where my little critter's going to go. So I'm just using that sentiment because I'm going to kind of offset the sentiment down to the bottom left and our little critter to the bottom right. And because I'll be Copic colouring the critter, I'm going to stamp him out in my Memento Tuxedo black ink as well. So I just needed one stamping for that and we're ready to colour. Now I'm just going to show a little bit of colouring of the holly branches around the outside. So I'm going to show you these ones and then the top ones, and then I'll be colouring the rest off camera because I do the same thing all the way along. So all my colours are going to be displayed in the top left hand corner for you to be able to see what colours I use for this blend. And I didn't go fully up to the top of this because I'm going to use the lightest colour of G40 as my highlight colour. Now I'm going to now show you the top little leaves, which I kind of did a little bit differently than the actual holly. But I'm using exactly the same colours, so it's the same colours all the way around. Blend that out with the G43. Just slowly working into that white cardstock for our highlight colour, the G40. And it's just such a pretty blend of green. Now I did go out a little bit, and so I've just grabbed my colourless blender to just get that push back in. So as you can see, I did the rest of the colouring off camera, and I'm just going to show you could just colour the holly berries up. So I'm just going to show you the colours that I'd use for these. But I will be actually using some Nuvo drops to colour them later on because I just wanted to add a little bit of dimension to the card as well. So now we're going to start colouring up our little critter. So I'm just getting my darkest kind of where my shadows are going to be, and then I'll come in with my darkest colour to colour them out. So I'm just slowly working. There's not a huge amount of space on this little cutie. But I'm going to colour him up anyway. And we'll go in with the C5 to finish off that blend for his outer body part, so his arms and his top of his head and the sides. So we're going to colour up his little face and his belly in some lighter grey markers. So I'm going now with my darkest marker is going to be the C3. And I'm just, obviously his little head will throw a little bit of shadow, and at the very base of his belly is going to be in shadow as well. We'll blend that out with the C1. So I want his face to look a little bit white, so I'm not going to fully colour this up, but we want to make sure we give that a little bit of shading. And now we'll finish off with a light hand going to that white cardstock so it blends out seamlessly into our white cardstock with our C00. And I always like to put some little rosy cheeks on these cute critters. So I'll go in with my darkest red, then blend that out with my R00, and then to make sure that blends in nicely with our grey, I'm just using the lightest of the grey markers. Now I'm going to just put in a little red nose on this cutie because he's pretending he's Rudolph, but I want to leave that little bit of white cardstock at the top so it looks like it's a nice shiny nose. And then we'll just colour up these little antlers. I'm trying to keep the colouring quite simple for this little critter. So we'll blend that out with the E74, and then our final colour in this combo is E71. So just a nice soft brown for those reindeer to keep in with the rest of the soft colours. Now I'm going to grab out my diagonal stitch rectangles and cut out our panel. I'm just going to set the largest rectangle with the diagonal stripes to the side because we'll be doing a background panel of red for that. But for this panel, I'm just using the smaller die. It's just a plain rectangle die that is the inner section of that diagonal die, and run that through my die cutting machine. So just pull off our purple tape, and now we've got the perfect cutout panel for our holly frame. Now you can get a die that cuts out both the holly frame and the circle insert, but because obviously I'm using that for my little critter and my sentiment, I've just used the rectangle die to cut this out. Now I'm going to line that sentiment up underneath our little critter, just offset to the left. And as I mentioned, I'm going to be using my Versafine Onyx black ink. I just find this is really great for stamping out sentiments. It just does a really crisp black sentiment. Just make sure that's tucked in and give that a second stamp. And now we've got our panel ready to go. Now I allowed that time to dry before I'm going to be using my Nuvo crystal drops in red berry. I always do a test off on the side because sometimes it can just splutter out when you haven't used it for a little while. I just give that a few stamps out, and once I'm happy with how that's flowing out, I'm just going to go to my panel now and just put these little dots all around those berries, and it just adds that little bit of dimension, and the red berry works perfectly. So I'll do the rest off camera. So now I'm going to use that largest diagonal rectangle die to cut out a red panel. So this is kind of like a shiny red color. You can just see that beautiful stitching detail around the outside, and that fits perfectly around that rectangle to form a beautiful red border. And to kind of tie that in with that red rectangle, I'm going to use that same red cardstock to do a little sub-sentiment using the sentiment that comes with the set. So I'm sorry this is a little bit off camera, but I'm just going to get that lined up in my Misti, prep that with my anti-static powder tool, and we're going to do some white heat embossing on this red cardstock. So we've got our Versa Watermark ink, and we'll give that a stamp up. Make sure we've got a good impression. I'll do a double stamping of that, and that makes sure that we've got plenty of ink on there for our heat embossing powder to stick to. So I've got my folded piece of printer paper and my Stampendous white embossing powder. We'll give that a sprinkle on and tap off any excess. And then I've preheated my heat tool. So I like to go into the back first to get rid of any stray particles, and then we can come straight to the front to get that nice and melted. We'll set that aside to dry, and once that's dry, we'll just wipe off that excess powder. Now I'll just bring out my Tonic trimmer, and we'll just trim this sentiment down to make a little sentiment strip. I'm just using the lines on the trimmer to work out where I need to cut this to make sure I've got an even amount around all the edges. I do apologize that most of this is actually off camera, but I'm sure you'll get the gist of what I'm doing. And now if I can get that out, we have the perfect size sentiment strip. Now I've got all my elements ready to go. We'll set those aside. I've cut and scored a white card base just a little bit bigger than our red panel, and we'll get some glue on the back and get that attached to our white card base. So get a nice layer all the way across, making sure we've got enough to adhere that on. Line that up and give that a good press down. And we'll get our little other panel. Again, I'm just going to keep this quite flat and just glue this directly on as well. So we'll line that up, which fits perfectly inside that diagonal rectangle die. And again, give that a nice press down. Now I will put on some foam squares on the back of our sentiment strip to give that a nice bit of support all the way along. Take off the release paper, and now just using my Reversible Tweezers, just get this lined up underneath that main sentiment, just kind of offset to the side of that coloured panel. Make sure that's straight before I give that a good press down. Now to time with those Nuvo drops for our holly berries, I thought these Fashion Rouge self-adhesive embellishments from Spellbinders would work perfectly. So I'm just going to kind of line them up around our little critter and our sentiment to kind of draw your eye to our center portion of our card. I'm just working out where this should lay. That wasn't sticking properly, so I'm just going to adhere that with a bit of glue. So I did that off camera. And I'm going to just add 2 down the bottom to kind of draw your eye up from those sentiments up to the top of our card. And this is the finished card for this tutorial. I think this Happy Holiday circle frame stamp is so versatile. It makes up a really quick card and it's so beautiful. And because you can actually cut it out with the actual frame that comes with it, or as I did just with a rectangle die, you can just do so many different cards with it. I hope you've enjoyed this card making tutorial. I just want to say thank you so much for all your support and for watching my videos for this year. I hope you have a wonderful Christmas and the happiest of New Year's. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye.